You think making more money will finally make you feel secure, but every time you level up, you feel worse. You tell yourself it's stress, responsibility, the long hours, but here's the truth. You're not chasing success, you're running from your shame. Over the course of this video, I'll show you the invisible belief that turns earnings into emptiness, why your wins feel hollow, and 3 practical shifts to reclaim your worth. Even if you spent your life equating value with income, you're not chasing success, you're running from shame. So, if every raise or promotion leaves you numb, this episode's for you. If you keep getting those rewards, your money keeps going up, right? Bank accounts flowing, but you feel like something's missing, stay tuned. You need to hear this. So I've been working with high-performing men, high-earning men for over a decade, and this is their most common issue. They've over-indexed on their career, and they've fallen behind on some of those things that actually matter to humans more. Things like relationships, health and fitness, spirituality and ethics, and having an identity beyond their title and their paycheck. And this is especially poignant because our economy sucks right now. A lot of guys who thought they were secure are out of work, and we're seeing a huge spike in depression, loneliness, and substance use because of this unemployment crisis. So if you're in that boat, stay tuned because I want to help you build an identity that's more resilient so you're able to deal with the situation and future situations that might be very similar. So as we're going through, there's a couple things that will be helpful to help you break this. The first thing is to uncover the core belief that keeps you stuck. More on that later. Once you do that, you can start to break the cycle and then build a new identity. So remember, just keep this in your mind. You're not chasing success, you're running from shame. So men, especially in Western culture, right, especially in American capitalist culture, we're socially and emotionally conditioned to tie our worth to performance, right, and the ability to provide for other people. Now, that can become a trap because there's no upper limit to that, right? You can always do more. You can always produce more. You can always make more money. There's never a level of enoughness that comes up. So if you're not motivated by the mission of your job, which let's be frank, most people are not, right? You don't even have to be, right? That's not involved in the healing process. You don't even have to be. But if you don't have that external intrinsic motivation, everything's external, then you're going to find yourself going again and again and again. And because you don't get that good feeling, you're going to start to feel shame. You're going to start to feel like there's something wrong with you. So the first thing that happens is your identity starts to fuse with your job. It's especially true for guys who have maybe been in the same job for a long time, who work extreme hours, or who have made meaningful sacrifices like, physical health or relationships, maybe even their family, maybe even moving, far away in order to support a job. You get what's called the sunk cost fallacy, right? The more you invest in something, the more valuable it starts to feel. So if you keep doing this, right, if you keep investing in this career, in this job, your identity start to fuse with that, right? You're going to become that role. It's really easy to tell if you have this, right? Can you talk about anything that's not your job? If the answer is no, not really, then that has become your identity. Something else that really gets guys stuck is this idea of an invisible contract. On this show, we talk about nice guys a lot. And the nice guy pattern is all about these covert, invisible contracts. A lot of guys have this idea, and we're even taught this growing up, that if you provide, right, often financially or physically, then you will be loved. And this is true for a lot of high-performing guys, right? Because a lot of these guys have been high-performing their whole lives. And of course, they got validation and love when they did well. When they got good grades, they got rewarded. When they aced exams, they got rewarded. When they got into a good school, they got rewarded. So they're being trained and conditioned nonstop to equate, right, love with performance. I want to make that really clear because it's not bad to be rewarded for doing good and excelling. But if that's the only time that you get positive validation, that's when it becomes a problem. And lastly, we got to talk about this idea of modern masculinity, right? A lot of men find a lot of pride in the ability to suffer, Right? And I'm sure you may be this guy, you definitely know this guy, right? The guy that's always one-upping, right? The guy that's always saying, well, I worked harder, I put in more hours, I did X, Y, and Z, I went above and beyond. And look, these are honorable traits, right? As men, as warriors, we need to be able to do that. But the problem shows up when you can't turn it off and when that becomes your only sense of identity. So, if you're a savvy listener, you've been listening to this and you've been able to notice that if any of these things fall apart, right? If the contracts break, if the identity falls apart, if you start to not perform as much and get that validation, you're going to fall into shame really, really quickly because it's very fragile. It's a very fragile way of existing. So remember, right? If this is true for you, you're not chasing success, you're running from shame. And that's an old script, right? That's not an adult way of thinking. That's a very childlike way of thinking. And you're not moving towards something. There's no ambition there, really. You're just running. You're running away. There's so much fear and anxiety. So a really common story, right? Again, composite client, anonymous, right? Not sharing real stories here, but someone that we kind of work with is the guy who keeps getting promoted over and over again, right? And he's made some significant sacrifices. He hasn't been available for his family. Maybe he's not dating. Maybe he's let his health go, and he hasn't been going to the gym or exercising. Right? He's overweight, drinks too much, but he can't quite stop. There's almost an addictive quality to it. You might be this guy, right? I know I have been this guy in the past, but he can't stop because what's really motivating him isn't the job, right? It's not wanting to let people down. It's not wanting to be seen as the weakest link, not wanting to mess up the project, not wanting to be the one that people talk, behind his back about. These are the real motivators. The fear, the shame, the anxiety, that is what is keeping the guy running. It's not ambition, it's fear. And these types of guys really struggle being alone. If they spend a weekend alone, you'll find that they often, put themselves in some kind of stupor. They drink too much, they zone out on the TV, they just kind of crash hard because they don't really have an identity. They don't know who they are when they're not on. And they spend so much energy being on that by the time they shut off hard. So what I tend to do with these guys is, one, get to know them, right? Get to know who they were when they were a kid, how this facade and mask got built. And you'll find a lot of these guys, they're hollow, right? They don't have an identity. So you got to start to build it. You got to start to figure out how to be alone. You have to start to rekindle old hobbies. You have to start to take risks and get into a relationship. And therapy is great for this because you have somebody who, one, is not going to judge you, because I've talked to, like I said, at this point, probably hundreds of guys that are actually quite hollow underneath their job. And two, I'll meet you every week, right? So we're going to figure out how to move you forward at a reasonable and sustainable pace. So the first thing we got to figure out is the unconscious thing that's motivating you. So again, like I said before, a really common one is finding that love and success are tied together. So if that's true, then you find yourself really hollowing out when you're not getting praised. And over time, you become more and more needy. You end up needing that praise a lot more frequently. It needs to be a lot bigger. Well, this can certainly accelerate your career in the beginning. What it ultimately does is create somebody who is very ego-driven. You can, when you're turning in a final, year-end annual review type project thing, you take it personally, right? It's about your character. It's about how you are effective in the world. When you are hiring or firing or going for a performance review, everything stings. Every negative feedback stings because all of the worth in your life is external. You don't have that resilience to kind of go through ups and downs in your job and know that you're not entirely your job, right? You have another personality, right? You have a full identity that can be consistent, right? If your life is 100% your job, or even let's say 80% your job, and you're not doing well for a variety of reasons, maybe most of them outside of your control, then 80% of your life sucks. But if you can diversify your life, whether that be through hobbies or relationships or activities, right? Other commitments, right? Then if your job goes down to 40% of your life, even if that's going well, you have another 60% of your life that's working out for you. So that's the idea, is it's all about diversifying. So how do you do this? How do you build an identity? Right? That's a huge deal. We're going to talk about it a little bit here. The first thing you got to do is you got to figure out what that core belief is. There's a couple that I shared during this talk, and I'll go through them again, right? One is, I'm not lovable if I'm not providing. One is that fear of disappointing others. Another one can be a fear of humiliation, a fear of, someone talking behind your back or gossiping. One could be that kind of deep feeling that you're just never enough and you constantly have to prove yourself over and over again, trying to have other people be proud of you. Another can be the sense of getting value from suffering, right? The man who suffers the most is the strongest. Those are just a couple. But I would encourage you to take a moment and write them down. Try to figure out, like, what are these beliefs that are motivating you? And after each belief, break it down. Figure out, like, okay, what is the evidence for this belief that convinces me that's true? And what's some evidence against the belief that convinces me that it's not the way that the world works? And you got to check your assumptions, man, right? You got to check and see, are these core beliefs really true? Are they holding up under pressure, right? We're doing the scientific method here, Are these really what is how the world works? And, spoiler alert, they're not. You're going to find that your beliefs are emotional, right? They don't make sense. They're not rational. Doesn't mean that they're not powerful. In fact, they're even more powerful because of that. But you need to start to unhook the emotional charge from reality, right? If doing your job is always about never disappointing others, one, you're going to get hamstringed, because when you're a leader, you have to ultimately learn how to disappoint people and do it gracefully. But two, your job's going to be so charged and you're not going to be that effective in it. So as you can start to unhook yourself from these assumptions through practice, then you can start to become free. So let's do it right now as you're listening, right? Write down your number one top provider belief. One sentence. And then say, hey, I believe that X is true. I'm afraid of disappointing people. I'm curious if it's true. Just adding that little bit of curiosity, that little bit of questioning starts to make a hole that can slowly open, and you can open up to a new way of being. And if you find yourself having a couple of these beliefs that motivate you, it's just another reminder that, again, you're not chasing success, you're running from shame. So once you've figured out some of these beliefs, even though rationally you can write it down, you can be like, all right, I get it. But you're still going to be controlled by them. The only way that the brain learns these types of things is by experience. So what you have to do is you have to start to test them and counter them, right? Counter these beliefs. So find some risks that you can take that are low, something like refusing to do overtime for a few evenings in a row, asking for help, asking a coworker to help you on something or to collaborate, letting another family member, letting your partner pay for dinner so you don't always have to provide all the time. Finding these small little things that can start to contradict these beliefs and just see, like, does your world fall apart? Probably won't. But your brain doesn't know that until you actually take these emotional risks. If you keep doing this, you'll find that over time, you'll start to deprogram yourself. You start to learn things that research has known has been true for decades, right? One of these things is, like, the more that you rest, if you are able to rest and recover effectively, you'll be more productive. But the workaholic just wants to push and charge all the time. So learning how to recover is actually a skill that can make you more productive, but it requires taking that risk to rest first. Similarly, asking for help, right? Every great thing that humans have accomplished has been done in teams. So at some point, you're going to need to bring other people on to be a force multiplier. But if you're used to controlling everything or being, the guy with all the answers, then you're going to get capped out on what you can accomplish. But you don't believe that until you start asking for help and seeing what you can do when you're working with others. So if you keep doing this over and over again, and we're talking, years, right? Especially if you're, in your 30s or 40s or even 50s, and you've been doing this for years, it's going to probably take a while to deprogram, right? If you keep doing this, you're going to start to create gaps in your life. right? You're going to start to get a little bit of distance between your identity and your work identity. And you're going to get really depressed, which sucks. But I see it happen every time. Because what you find is that you create that distance and then you go into a void because there's nothing on the other side of that identity. This is when you really got to buckle down, start to build that identity. For a lot of guys, fitness is a great place to plug in, right? Finding a type of workout or a group or a gym or running or whatever it is, a sport that you enjoy, that you can build an identity out of. I think that's a really common one, especially for, Western American dudes. You can also look at hobbies. You can look at spirituality or ritual religion. You can look at relationships or connection, volunteering, trying to learn something you've always wanted. Maybe it's a language, maybe it's a skill, right? Learning how to drywall. It literally doesn't matter what it is, but starting to create a new identity that is more resilient, that, like I said, is more kind of like spaced out, right? It's not 100% work. It's 40% work, 30% relationships, 30% hobbies, something like that, right? Where you're a more diverse and therefore more resilient person. A great way to do this is, of course, therapy, men's groups. We got tons of them. Run them at menstherapy.online. But also things like, journaling, so you can keep track of yourself, finding accountability partners. Maybe it's your romantic partner. Maybe it's a really good friend. Finding ways to schedule breaks, right? Scheduling rest and recovery, spending weekends alone, doing staycations, right? Trying to be your own best friend, essentially, right? These are ways you can start to build that identity. So as we're going through this, I want to challenge you to a weekly challenge, right? Every day, I want you to write down one belief that controlled you, right? One provider belief, like we said before. It could be the same one, right? But link it to an activity, link it to an action. You're like, wow, okay, like I wasn't, ambitious. I just didn't want my coworker to think I was stupid. Shit. Okay. Note one a day. Then think about a counter test and perform it, right? Think about a small emotional risk you can take at work to start to test that belief and see if it stands up under pressure. And then lastly, write down a non-financial win, right? And it can be minor. It can be, I saw the moon and it was really awesome, right? Or I listened to my favorite song, right? It's going to be small things in the beginning before you build out your identity. But again, journal a belief, perform a counter test, and then write a non-financial win. So comment, share, right? Comment those 3 things. I'd love to see that. Join our Slack. It's totally free. Message me, right? Let me know exactly what you did. And you can inspire other guys to do the same thing. So I want to reiterate, I say at the end of so many of my videos, but I just want to keep saying it, is you're not broken, right? You were taught to do this. You were taught to seek validation. You were taught to seek performance, but you can change it. That's the power of this therapy stuff we keep talking about. You can change yourself. You can reprogram yourself. You can make yourself better, happier, more fulfilled. That's the promise of therapy. And I've seen it happen for hundreds of guys at this point. You can do it. It's freaking hard and it takes a long time, but it's very, very possible. And you can do it with support. So if you enjoyed this video, do the social stuff, like, share, subscribe. Send it to somebody who defines himself by his job, maybe someone who's out of work right now that needs to build a new identity, maybe someone who might be unfortunately kind of collapsing. We're here for you. And hopefully this helps to kind of get you back going, and not just going better, but going in a different, more sustainable way. You're not chasing success. You're running from your shame. So name that contract and belief, test it, and then choose differently.